Hello, we are starting our YouTube series today with the Department of Ethnic Studies. And today we have Dr. Harding, so she'll introduce herself a little bit.
Hello, everybody. I'm Dr. Rachel Harding. I'm Associate Professor of Indigenous Spiritual Traditions, and I teach a lot of different kinds of courses in the department, from African American history and the African diaspora. I also teach literature courses. I teach courses in religion, courses on women of color, and I just love teaching, and I love the students at UC Denver. So I'm happy to have this chance to talk about our experience in the department and how important ethnic studies is for everybody.
Awesome. So we will first go into our first question. And our first question for you today is, why and how did you get into ethnic studies?
Okay. Well, there's a very long answer, which I won't tell you all of, but in a nutshell, I was kind of born into ethnic studies. My parents were historians and activist scholars who were very much involved in the Southern freedom movement, the Black freedom movement of the 1960s and 70s. And my dad was one of the people who helped found African American studies or Black studies, which was the precursor to ethnic studies in many universities around the country. So in that sense, I feel like I kind of grew up in this tradition. But in a more personal way, I was a teenager in the 1970s when there was a lot of energy around multiracial coalitions, third world organizing, and one of my after-school jobs was at the American Friends Service Committee, which is an organization in Philadelphia, where the headquarters was in Philadelphia, where I was living at the time. It's a service organization run by the Quakers, which is one of an Anabaptist religious group that some of you may have heard of. They have a long history of connection to abolitionism, to peace and justice organizing. Anyway, they had a section of their organization called the Third World Coalition. And that's where I interned when I was in high school. And I got really excited about connections between the struggles of Black people and Asian Americans and Native Americans and Latinos and Latinas, Latinx people now. But I was just so excited about the ways that all of us who represent marginalized, colonized people of color, and working class white folks. I was excited about things that we could do together to help transform our society. And so that started in high school. And then when I went to college, I chose a college, Brown University, that had a very strong group of politically active students of color. And so I would say from high school and college is when I started getting interested in ethnic studies.
Our second question is there anything in ethnic studies that has changed from the time that you were a student to now in our present
Could
day?
you speak a little bit louder? I'm sorry, I'm just not hearing you as well, Janice. Thank you.
So the second question is there anything in ethnic studies that has changed from the time that you were a student to now?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. Um, hmm. Well, I would say that, excuse me, one of the things that has changed is that ethnic studies is probably available more broadly um, at colleges and universities, and even in some high schools now than it was in the mid and late 70s when I was a student. However, ethnic studies, as anyone who has had the Introduction to Ethnic Studies course or is familiar with the discipline at all, you will probably know that the history of the discipline is very much tied to the history of social justice activism in this country. That's how ethnic studies came to exist. Students at colleges around the country and then also high schools were saying, we are not learning about ourselves. We're not learning our history. We are not hearing and seeing and being given the information that we need to know to see ourselves as part of the process of our nation becoming a multiracial democracy. And so this has to change. We've got to have space for everybody and for everybody's history. And because most ethnic studies programs around the country came into being because of student activism and community activism, one change perhaps that I would say I'm conscious of is that in some places that connection, that strong connection to community and to community activism is a little less salient. And I think that that's a weakness and I don't mean, I'm not talking about anybody in particular, but in the discipline as a whole, if your roots are in your connection to communities that are attempting to transform the status quo, and those roots are weakened, then the discipline also suffers. And so I see some of that, but I also see, especially in the past 5 or 6 years, I would say, particularly with the activism around the Black Lives Matter movement and also around the advocacy on behalf of the Dreamers, that there is a stronger emphasis to reconnect ethnic studies with its roots as a tradition of advocating and acting on behalf of broadening democracy in the United States. And that as much as we can stay connected to those roots, I think that strengthens us as a discipline. Mm-hmm.
Our third question is, why do you believe ethnic studies is important? And how do we benefit from ethnic studies?
Oh, wow. This is one of my favorite questions. Let's see, where do I start? In some ways, Janice, years ago, when I was a child, when I was in elementary school and middle school, I'm trying to remember, I think we had once or twice, we had something called something like a civics class. I know my parents, who were born in the 1930s, my dad grew up in New York and my mom grew up in Chicago. Both of them talked about growing up with teachers who felt a certain kind of responsibility to teach civics, that is, how to be a citizen of a multiracial democracy. I feel like ethnic studies is one of the few disciplines in the liberal arts at this point that understands civics and civics education as part of its responsibility. There aren't too many other places, too many other disciplines where you really have an opportunity to study in depth the multiracial history of the country and the process of the country becoming what it has the potential to become in terms of being a healthy and just multiracial nation. So I think that it's important for everybody to study ethnic studies, and ethnic studies just provides depth and brilliance to anything else that you study, whether it's biology, whether it's sociology, whether it's fine arts, whether it's religion, whether it's psychology. Everything can be enriched by bringing an understanding of the multiracial, multicultural groundings of our society. If you can bring that, an appreciation for that, an understanding for the complexities of that to your work, in any era, particularly as we move further into the 21st century, it just adds a shine to whatever else you do. So yes, I think ethnic studies is needed and helpful and very necessary for our country and for us as individuals.
That was an excellent answer. Mhm. Number 4. So, what are some projects that you are working on right now?
Okay. Well, I'm one of these people who always has too many projects going. So I will tell you about a few. One of my long-standing projects is a comparison of the way in which Black women in the United States who were involved in the Southern Freedom Movement or the Civil Rights Movement, and also some contemporary social justice movements, the way in which Black women in the United States and Black women in Brazil, who are also involved in social justice activism, use religion and spirituality as a resource for compassionate social justice work. I've done some writing about that. Certainly my mother's memoir, which was published a few years ago, has that at the heart of that text, but I'm very interested in comparing the way women in different parts of the African diaspora, particularly the US and Brazil, but other places as well, draw on these ancestral resources of strength, spiritual resources, cultural resources, to keep moving in terms of doing what we need to do to transform the societies that we live in. So that's one project. Another has to do with the Veterans of Hope Project, which is um, a, a project that my mother and father founded back in the late 90s. And um, while they were living, particularly while my dad was living, and he passed in 2014, we interviewed over 70 elders from different social justice traditions here in the United States and in Brazil. I'm sorry, internationally. Largely, the folks that we interviewed were people who had been involved in the civil rights movement, but we also interviewed people from the American Indian movement, from the gay and lesbian movement, from the Chicano rights movement, particularly folks here in the Denver, Colorado area. Also, people from who were involved in Asian American social justice issues. And all of those interviews have been collected now and digitized by Emory University. And so one of my tasks is to create a platform where they can be shared, and to also document some of the history of the Veterans of Hope Project, which was centered around gathering these stories of elders who were involved in social justice activism from a position of connection to spirituality and religion, very, very broadly defined, certainly not just Christianity, but also Muslims and Buddhists and folks who practice indigenous traditions, and folks who practice Judaism, looking at all of the ways that people use a connection to spirit to do transformative social justice work in the societies that they live in. So that's another of my projects. And then probably the third is I've been, in addition to being a historian, I'm also a poet. And I've written poetry for most of my life, but as an older adult, it kind of was sitting in the background of my life for a little while. And I have been more recently pulling those interests up again and am writing more poetry.
That's really exciting. Our fifth question for you today is, how have you contributed to the department, to ethnic studies, and to the community?
Okay. Well, let me see. Let me start with the community first. Um, I think I'm really lucky, fortunate to have had my parents, Vincent and Rosemarie, as models, because as I said, both of them were historians, but they were both also very, very much community activists. And I think in some ways, although neither of them was ordained, um, they considered their work a kind of a ministry. And so I think in some ways I feel that way about my work. I um, um, try to be available as much as possible, both to individuals and to organizations who are interested in knowing about African American history, about the African diaspora, and particularly about the relationship between social justice organizing and religion or spirituality in social movements across a number of communities in this country and elsewhere. I periodically take groups, study tours to Brazil. I'm going to be organizing one for our campus once we're able to start traveling again. But in the past, I've done that probably for about 20, 25 years just on my own, taking activists and teachers and students and religious leaders, anyone who's interested in learning more about particularly Afro-Brazilian religion and culture and the relationship between ancestral religious traditions in Brazil and a history of struggling for racial justice there. So that's something that I do in the community and that I expect to continue and that I love. I also, as I get to be, I guess, more of an elder in as an academic, as an educator, I'm very concerned about young people coming behind me, especially young people of color and young people of all races who are really searching for a way to help our country transform itself and to be, as I said, a more healthy, a more just place. So that's why I love teaching ethnic studies courses, and I love the students who come to those classes, whether they are majors or minors or coming from other disciplines altogether. um, I get excited by meeting people of your generation who are excited about life and who are concerned about our country and who want us really to be the best kind of country we can be for everybody who's here, not ignoring the traumas and the difficult histories that we have here, but recognizing that we are and must be more than that. But we have to face the difficult histories. We have to face the traumas, and we have to recognize that we have resources in our individual lives, in our collective histories, in our cultures, in our spiritualities that can help us grow and become more connected to each other as a nation. We have resources to do this. And ethnic studies helps us learn what some of them are and helps us discover them. So I get very enthused by my students, and I like helping them and doing things with them, whether that's in the context of the class or if I'm asked to do things outside of the class and in the community. And then, you know, as I said, as I'm a historian, I'm a writer, I work in the area of religion, and I'm connected to all of those areas professionally. I'm the co-chair of the African diaspora religion section of an organization called the American Academy of Religion, which is the big kind of overarching professional organization of everybody in the country who teaches religion. Um, I'm involved with other organizations that are connected to studying the African diaspora, the Association for the Study of the Worldwide African Diaspora. I'm a member of that organization. I'm a member of the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, the Latin American Studies Association. So, you know, I'm involved in both professional kind of academic circles as well as communities that are more associated with helping grassroots community people connect to our history and to our traditions of culture and spirit.
Thank you.
Okay.
So question number 6, what's one change within the community or our society you hope to see in your lifetime?
Ooh, in my lifetime, in my lifetime. Okay. Ooh, there's so many. You want me to name one? Can
Yeah,
I name more than
pick
one?
the best one. Or if you
Just
have
pick
two
the
good
best one.
ones, you can pick them too.
Okay. Oh, wow. 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 Okay, 2. So on just a very practical level, I would like our country to have um, universal health care for everybody, very high quality health care for everybody, because I feel like if we had that guaranteed and in an expansive way, in a way that includes um, um, daycare for families that need it, and elder care, and respite times and places to rest that included an understanding of the need for extended times away from work, you know, guaranteed 4 to 6 weeks a year of vacation as part of universal health care. I'm just thinking we need things in this country that help us take care of each other and take care of ourselves. And if we had that, it would open up space for so many other kinds of creativity, because people wouldn't be tired all the time and people wouldn't be sick all the time. So, okay, that's one thing. And since you gave me 2, my other is for us to really live into the joy that is possible, because we have people from every part of the globe here in this country, which means we have the ancestral wisdom of every part of the globe accessible to us here. And we can use that in forming public policies, informing educational pedagogies, informing new ideas about business and economy. I mean, there's just so much creativity that's possible in this country. And so my dream of what I would love to see before I die is that we acknowledge and celebrate and honor and cultivate that tremendous energy and potential that's here, because we are all here. We are all here in this country. So let's see what beauty can come out of this global community by honoring everybody who's here.
I love that passionate answer.
Okay, good.
So our last question that I have for you is, what is your advice for students who are currently majoring or minoring in ethnic studies right now?
Yes.
What kind of careers can they find with having an ethnic studies major or minor, or even students who are interested
Yes.
in taking these classes?
Excellent questions. Okay, well, and this may actually be part of the project, excuse me, Janice, that you are doing, or maybe another step of it, but we, in just our department here, have alums who are doing everything from medical school and veterinary practice to working with legislators, to teaching, to counseling. And so kind of just parenthetically, before I say my part of it, I would suggest that some of the people who have actually come through this particular ethnic studies department could be highlighted, because there are just some great examples of what people are doing with ethnic studies degrees. But on the other side, I would say, just as I was indicating earlier, that ethnic studies in some ways is the closest thing we have to a civics education in this country. I think it's also an essential part of a rounded liberal arts education. And so in the same way that a degree like English or sociology or psychology gives you the skills and the practice of thinking creatively and critically so that you can do almost anything, ethnic studies gives you that, plus a grounding in the multiracial history of the country. It would be an excellent base for people who are interested in law, particularly law related to immigration, related to human rights, related to civil rights, people who are interested in governing, in politics, people who are interested in doing social service work as a social worker or as a counselor, as a psychologist, as a community organizer. All of these are careers that would fit and grow very comfortably from a base in ethnic studies. Some of the students watching may know, and others may not, that a few years ago, the MCAT, the test that folks have to take in order to get into medical school, um, changed some aspects of the exam to emphasize knowledge, experience, familiarity with multicultural realities in the United States, with diversity, with inclusion. And many times graduates programs across the board, whether they are medicine, dentistry, law, or graduate programs in the humanities, as long as you have the basic required courses for that discipline, it's actually helpful to have a major or a minor like ethnic studies to complement the biology or the chemistry or the psychology, because it gives the graduate school a sense that you are a person who is seriously interested in other people and who's seriously interested in helping our society be a better place for all of us who live here. Because ethnic studies inculcates that kind of concern in anybody who spends time with the discipline. It helps, I think, build a more humane and compassionate character in our students, and a character of concern with justice and with human rights. And those are the kinds of values that certainly many graduate programs in many, many disciplines are looking for in their students.
Thank you. Thank you so much for letting me interview you today for our YouTube
Thank you,
series.
Janice. I enjoyed it very much.